What is going on, everybody, and welcome inside the Browns beat. We've got a great show planned for you tonight as the off season can really finally begin, or I guess the league year can finally begin, which it did today. And that means we've got Cleveland Browns news and rumors and things to talk about. We've got a great special guest coming up on the back half of the show. So we're so glad you joined us here tonight on Inside the Browns Beat. If you're catching us somewhere, I don't know what's going on. I just want to do a little quick programming note. Normally we stream on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and X and all that. But for some reason, I keep getting an error on X. So if you know people that usually watch on X, tell them to come over to YouTube or to Twitch or something like that and watch over here while we get this worked out. But the next order of business here, let me get it up on the screen here. I got to put the QR code up because now that the league year has started, you have no excuse. You have no excuse but to get over to the OBR.com, to hit subscribe, and to become a real part of Cleveland's oldest, largest independent Browns coverage site. So scan the QR code with your phone, get over to the OBR.com, hit subscribe, and be a part of the show. Like I said, we've got a great one a little bit later in the show from the Chronicle Telegram out here our way. Fred in Elyria, Scott Petrak's going to join us on the back half of the show to just kind of talk about what we've seen, which we're going to start by doing, and then to maybe talk about what we can plan to see out of the Cleveland Browns moving forward. But to kick things off, it's going to be you and me, Fred. And again, joining me as always, I'm your host, Michael Keefe. Joining me, my co-host, Fred Greetham. And Fred, the league year's underway. We can finally start talking about actual real things when it comes to rebuilding this Browns roster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, officially 3 hours ago is when, it became everything official agreements. Some of the contracts still haven't been signed, obviously, but the Browns announced everything that they announced was already reported at the OBR for, free agent signings, one re-signing one of their agent, and then a tight end and a linebacker, so basically they addressed, I wrote a series 5 steps. You asked me last week if they ever listened. Yeah, they did, at least on step 5 and 4. I mean, I had Quincy Williams in there if they couldn't get Bush, and I had actually Zion Johnson, one of the guards they signed, on the inside. Obviously Elton Jenkins was released, so he wasn't a free agent until he was released. But they're attacking that like this, and then they made the trade obviously before for Titus Howard, for the tackle. Tackle is my number one priority. He's the only move they've made thus far. But I think it's a very measured approach, kind of what we expected with Andrew Berry. The biggest thing to me is I was expecting to know a little bit more about what they're really thinking about quarterback. I haven't heard them in any discussions with any of the, available quarterbacks. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means we're not really even pursuing, or it was very politely, check in, and then they weren't in serious discussions with Malik Willis, or, you saw the Tua immediately agreed with Kevin Stefanski down there with the Falcons. And now you have Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins coming out, and, it's already sounding like a foregone conclusion that Murray's going to the Vikings. And I also saw Cousins to the Vikings. So I doubt if both of them are going to the Vikings. So it's kind of like musical chairs. Are you interested in any of those guys? So a lot to play out here, but, that's my first impressions. They address the offensive line. We knew they were going to. They almost did a little more than I thought they would. It looks like they've got at least 3 starters out of the 5 pegged in by the amount of money they committed to these guys.
Yeah, 100%. And well, again, we're going to dive into all of it because there's a lot to talk about. Again, not just what the Browns have done, which I think a lot of Browns fans are actually very happy about. It's been a in a world where we need to come together a little bit. It's been fun to kind of watch Browns fans come together, not on everything, I know Browns fans still want him to do more, but for the most part, I mean, what the Browns have done to start off free agency is kind of what has been asked of them, and addressing things that just desperately needed it. So we'll get into all that. We'll get into what we think still coming. Again, we got Scott Petrak coming here in a little bit, and just don't worry. By the way, Chef Brian K in the comments gave a great story, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to bring it up to Scott, so don't you even worry. Just hang out. He'll be here around 7:30. Speaking of the comments, you saw Chef Brian K say, "Hi, Mike. Hi, Fred." You saw Pat Shea say, "Away we go." You even saw Chris. And listen, man, you can only say so many nice things to me, so cross this off the list until next month. But said I had to fill in on Monday for both Lane and Barry. It's an impossible task, but we did our best, and I appreciate the kind words, Chris. But be a part of the show again. Ask your Browns questions, and bring up your topics you want to talk about, and we'll do our best to get to them as well. But Fred, let's start with I think kind of the more we're going to get into the signings that they made, but I think the more kind of timely thing that happened today, and I just want your take on it, what you think it means, because I see some instant takes on it. And then I see some people clapping back and forth. But I think a lot of the question has been with the Browns and the offensive line, what's going to happen with Joe Bitonio? And it was reported today that the Browns are going to void the contract of Joe Bitonio, creating a pretty large dead cap hit for the year. Certainly, you would think if he told them he was retiring, they would have waited and done this later because it would have cost them a lot less money. I'm not sure why they do it now if they're going to bring him back. I know some people think this indicates that Joel maybe said that he wants to go play somewhere else, and they're giving him a chance to go do that. So just your impressions of that report and of the Browns voiding Joel Bitonio's contract.
Yeah, I go a lot by Jack Duffin, who's over in England, who, he follows the salary cap very closely, and he was sure that, if he was retiring, they would do something. I think you can designate it after June and spread it out over 2 years. Hard for me to believe that the Browns were asleep at the wheel and we're going to take a $23 million salary cap hit is the way they do things. So I think there's more to the story, but I wondered about that. I had wondered a few times. When we talked to Joe the day after the season, he got teary-eyed about reflecting his career.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt he was going to retire. And I felt like if he came back, for sure he'd come back with the Browns. He seems like a guy that wants to play his whole career. I mean, he's within striking distance of being one of the all-time. He's got 178 games, in his career with the Browns, whether that means a lot or not. He's one of the top 7 or 8 all time, and I think he'd move up. But yeah, it's a little interesting if he's saying, well, I want to go chase a ring like Mike Evans. I don't know. I mean, you could say, well, maybe he'll go with Stefanski and Bill Callahan, but I don't think they're in that position. So I really don't know by this. I have to think there's more to the story because I know they gave him an extra 3 weeks, and they certainly had to know what his intention is because, I mean, Zion Johnson's a left guard. He has played right guard, but why would you put somebody in a position that they're not as good or familiar with? Elton Jenkins has played left guard, and so they've basically signed guys that could replace Bitonio, obviously not the caliber that he did for so long. But I'm really kind of a little curious about what's going on here because he seems such a stand-up guy that he wouldn't wait till 4:59 on the deadline day or whatever to let him know. So I'm just sure there's some explanation to it. Maybe he is looking to see if he has interest. Maybe a Super Bowl team like Mike Vrabel might say, hey, we got it. I haven't looked at their roster or whatever. I don't know. So it's all speculation, but I'm sure we'll find out soon. But even if he was coming back, and I think it'd be great for the Browns, they have to address this. And so I think they've addressed it with the Zion Johnson, Tevin Jenkins, Elton Jenkins. They are all interchangeable, and you do have a couple holdovers, in Zach Zinner. There's been talk about Leviston maybe playing guards or even DeJuan Jones. So I think they have flexibility. More than anything, they can field an offensive line right now. I mean, with the 4 guys
Oh
they've
yeah.
added. And I mean, even if you had to, DeJuan Jones played left tackle until he got hurt. So you got him. I don't think they would count on him, or they shouldn't count on him. They need to still address that, and I think that's a top priority in the draft. It'll be interesting. The top guy still left by experts is Rasheed Walker, the left tackle for the Packers, but his cost might be dropping a little bit because there's been a couple guys that signed. The guy signed with the Giants. I think it was a right tackle, got like 3 years, 39. So that might drive it down a little. And maybe the Browns would sign Rasheed Walker. I think we talked about him. He might be the top left tackle available, but in the NFL, he's not ranked as one of the top NFL tackles. And the worry was he would get paid like one of the best in because left tackles are kind of like, they're not quarterbacks, but they get paid big time money. And so that's curious there. Would the Browns sign him? And then you have initially the offensive line set, and then you could really go anywhere in the draft and not be forced, to take a tackle at 6.
Well, listen, just real quick back to Joel Bitonio, because instantly got me thinking. I know Jack, and I know he's already put it out there. Seems to think that this move, voiding his contract, indicates that Joel Bitonio wants to continue playing, but probably elsewhere. I've seen some dissenting comments to that the Browns still may bring him back and whatever. But I do think this. We obviously had the situation with Joe Thomas for all those years where he just wouldn't leave. Not that we were trying to get rid of him, but he wouldn't. He told us, I remember we had him on Garage Beers, and he really dove into the story about Peyton Manning recruiting him to Denver. And how he was going to go be the left tackle of Denver. And then he was like, nah, I'm not leaving Cleveland. And I think we, you judge everything based on the gold standard that was Joe Thomas. But I'm telling you, I'm throwing this out there right now. If Joel Bitonio went back to the Browns and said, you know what? I want to win a Super Bowl before it's all said and done, and it's almost all said and done. Go, man. Go do it. I love it. I'm not mad about it. I'm not salty. I think he should go chase a ring if that's what he wants to do. That man, Joel Bitonio, very similar to Joe Thomas, gave us the best of his career. He was one of the best. You never, ever, 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 ever had to worry about that guy's spot on the offensive line from the minute he got drafted until now. And if he wants to go play somewhere else, maybe it is to chase a ring. Maybe he liked playing with Kevin Stefanski and Bill Callahan. And he wants to go to Atlanta. Maybe, remember, he's a Nevada guy. Maybe he wants, and when he played in college, Nevada didn't have an NFL team, but they do now. Maybe he wants to go, although I think the Raiders are in a little bit of flux after the news of the day. But maybe he wants to go back to Nevada and play where he played in college and be a part of that kind of resurgence with a brand new quarterback. Whatever he wants to do, though, as a Browns fan, that guy has earned whatever he decides. Whatever he wants to do, go do it. I hope he is. If he continues playing somewhere else, I'll never do anything but root for him. Just one of the all-time great Browns. And I don't think it does nothing to tarnish him if he decides he wants to go play somewhere else.
No, I agree. He's close to Joe Thomas, and and so I'm sure he's weighed all that. He said, number one, it was all about his health. And so, at this time last year, right after the season, the talk was scrapping the Ken Dorsey offense and going back to the wide zone. Oh. And you could tell that Bitonio, Conklin, Posick, all those guys were kind of re-energized. And then we know, how disappointing the season was. So I don't know if he wants to start from scratch, but somebody said going to Atlanta, maybe, you go back to Callahan and so forth. If you really want to play, in another other colors, but I wouldn't say then his top priority was a Super Bowl, because I don't think anybody has the Falcons as Super Bowl or bust. You would think it would be like the Patriots, with Mike Vrabel, or Bills or something like that. So I don't know the situations, but maybe he's just kind of letting the dust settle and see if he gets any calls. Maybe that's what, I think he's such a pro. He probably didn't even put it out there that he was going to be available, just letting his agent check around. I don't know, but it's all speculation at this point. But I just can't believe the Browns would be caught sleeping at the wheel,
No.
and take that big of a hit. Maybe they did. Maybe they just said, well, we got to do it now. I don't know. But, or they got to restructure some more agreements with guys already on the roster. But we'll see. I'm sure it's going to, if he announces he's signed with a team, we'll know the answer to that.
Yeah, exactly right. But, if we've seen the last, and again, there's still rumblings that Bitonio could return. But if we've seen the last of him, what a career, what a run. I remember that pick. I remember I was in an airport. I was in an airport in Providence, Rhode Island when they made that pick. And I was like, Joel Bitonio, huh? And what a guy he turned out to be. So keep it on the offensive line. You brought up a lot of names, Fred, but, just the overall, when we talk about, let's dive into this for a minute, because I think people noticed a little bit of a change in the way Andrew Berry was kind of attacking things last year. And now this year, he's kind of attacking things his way. And, I've seen a lot of people bringing up, last year, Paul DePodesta on his way out. This year, there is no Paul DePodesta. I never really understood what the guy did anyways. But it does seem like there's a little bit of a different philosophy about Andrew Berry. And that philosophy, this year, to see him just so potently go after the offensive line. Like, part of me was halfway expecting, and I know everybody thinks this is obvious, but part of me was kind of expecting to be like, well, we like some of the things we saw out of this guy last year or that guy last year that were terrible, right? But I kind of expected, like, we liked a little bit of what we saw, so we're going to kind of keep that intact and keep that, and they haven't done that. Andrew Berry has attacked this offensive line. Again, it started with the trade for Titus Howard from Houston, and then the news they signed Zion Johnson, the big dude, the big guard from L.A., super athletic guy that just has to put it together in the NFL, but we'll see if he can do that in Cleveland. Tevin Jenkins coming back. Tevin Jenkins, I think, was one of the more impressive linemen they had last year. And that was also, Tevin Jenkins was also a cause of a lot of controversy and a lot of maybe some of the comments made by certain people around Wyatt Teller when he was leaving town, because they basically played Tevin Jenkins over Wyatt Teller at times. And then, to me, the big surprise, to pull Elton Jenkins from Green Bay, I know they were letting him go, but that's a really, really rock solid player along an offensive line. They really have done, in my opinion, Fred, they've done a great job just attacking what appeared to be the biggest weakness, and they didn't sit back and rest. It's what I like about what Andrew Berry's done. They didn't sit back and say, well, yeah, but we think Zach Zinter's going to be really good. Like, maybe they do, but he hasn't shown it yet, and they're making guys prove it. I really, really like that about the way they're attacking this.
Well, yeah, last year, in the wide receiver room especially, they didn't add anybody, and it was kind of like, we're just handing this job to Cedric Tillman. We really like him. Or, the players they already had. And I think that's a mistake. You can like them, but you got to create competition. And so I think the Jenkins thing kind of caught my interest. And I believe Tevin is his brother, right?
No, that was just a.
Oh, that's not true.
That was just a thing somebody said online.
Okay. I just knew if they got Rayshon, they'd have the trifecta, if they get him back. But there is, you got established players, and there was some talk that they were trying to trade for him, and then it was almost like a favor was done when he failed. They cut him because then they could go, kind of like last year, Malik Collins. turned
Yes.
out to be their best free agent signing, but he was really a cap casualty that when the 49ers waived him, they jumped on it. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, instead of spending 27 million for Linderbaum, and I don't know if how serious they were in that discussion. Again, I didn't really hear the Browns who they've been in on. There hasn't been a lot of that stuff, but you can spend that money. You bring in these guys, you get the 5 best players you can get, and then add depth. If somebody becomes available, hey, to me, what stands out was Zion Johnson and Titus Howard is availability or durability. I mean, those guys have been, they're out there like every week in the last 2 or 3 years, where the last 2 or 3 years with the Browns, you had a different offensive line every week. I lost track. I think the last I remember, they had 9 different combinations starters.
Unreal.
You remember Joe Thomas, he was out there every snap. Even if they were ahead 40-0, he was waving off the guy so he could keep his streak intact. So you want, first of all, guys that are going to be out there. And then you see some critics saying, well, the Browns overpaid or spent more than, well, they have to. When you're talking to a free agent, they can go wherever they want. And usually they go where the most money is. I mean, I've been around it enough, but if all things are equal and you can go to the Patriots and start, or you can go to the Browns and start for the same dollars, you're going to go to the Patriots. So you're going to have to pay them more to bring them in. And so I think that's the case, with Zion Johnson and probably even Elton Jenkins. And so, hey, so be it. However you get them here.
But to your point, Fred, if we're going to talk, I think that was a big thing with Zion Johnson. A lot of people said, "Oh, I don't know if I would have paid him as much as they did." Maybe a little bit on the extension for Titus Howard, whatever. Compared to what we saw over the last couple days, Fred, when we're talking about if you think they've overpaid, like take Zion Johnson, you think they overpaid for him, it's a minimal overpay. It is what it took to get the guy in the door. But I didn't see a single dramatic overpay. There was a part of me, and maybe it's just because I'm not going to say I'm grateful for Deshaun Watson. You'll never hear that out of me. But maybe just because they're still saddled there, they really have to be cautious on not doing that. So I'm watching some of these guys that I had listed as guys that I would like the Browns to kind of attack in free agency, and I'm watching some of the contracts that they signed. I saw Alec Pierce's contract about fell out of my chair. $29 million a year? No, thank you. No,
that's what happens every year.
I saw Linderbaum's and I think Linderbaum is probably he's easily a top 3 center in the NFL, and he's only 25 years old, and there's so much to like about him. But at $27 million a year? Yeah. No, I didn't want the Browns out there setting the market on anybody, because they can't do that right now. It means we've got an offensive line to build, Fred, and we've got a lot of guys that have to get brought in. You spend 27 mil on Tyler Linderbaum, and the rest of the offensive line is not going to be very good. And so if we're talking about overpays for any of these guys, it's minimal. It's minimal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I approach. I really think your long-term answer at the key positions, left tackle, and your best bet is in the draft. We all know we beat the dead horse. Jed Wills should be in the prime of his career. If nothing else, just a serviceable average starter at left tackle. I saw he signed today with the Bears.
Chicago Bear, Jed Wills.
And, you look at Wirfs, who was picked 3 picks later, is 5-time Pro Bowler now with the Buccaneers. So you get 5 years out of that guy, and that's the beauty of drafting in the first round. You got 2 picks. If you can get one of those guys that can be your left tackle for the next 10 years, that's where you get them, because you have them under control at least 5 years, and you're going to extend them beyond that. So that's to me, the big play. It'll be interesting to me if they pursue Rashid Walker, if his price comes down a little bit. And there's been some reading that I saw that from Green Bay that they think he might be interested in the Browns now because his Jenkins is a good buddy of his, played with him right next to him on the line. So who knows? I don't know enough about him to know if that's what you want to do or not, but that's a decision they have to make if they want to get somebody right now, or if they feel good enough in the draft to address it there. I really think you want to address things as much as you can with blue chip players in the draft. So we'll see what happens, but it's only 2 or 3 days into free agency. I think Andrew Berry's learned that the top guys in a weaker market, like you said, Alec Pierce, they get off the chart money, and I mean, Daniel Jones, who would think he's getting $60 million or something like that for 2 years or whatever it is.
Right.
And Malik Willis, they say, oh, it's a deal, $45 million. And he played 28 plays as a starter, so that's way more than a number one draft choice would get coming out of, in their first year. So,
what I
don't know.
What I like about the Browns approach, what I like about the Andrew Berry approach to this offseason so far is that the Browns, especially along that offensive line, had every reason to just reek of desperation, right? To reek of desperation, and they don't reek of desperation. They go out and they're like, if this dude wants $27 million a year, it's not going to be in Cleveland. And we'll go find some of these other guys that are going to just be good football players. And it's what I have preached this whole offseason is that you can build a great offensive line with good offensive linemen. You can build a great offensive line with good offensive linemen. And some of these contracts just reek of desperation. I never want my team to reek of, even if they're desperate, I don't want them to look desperate. And they do not look desperate to this point. So far, it's a poised approach. You said there's a couple guys. I think Taylor Decker's another guy that could be very interesting. He was cut by the Lions, but a big left tackle. Again, not a guy that I think is a great player, but he's pretty good. And so if they decide they want to just have the offensive line filled before we even get to the draft, they certainly have opportunities to do that. And I think I agree with what you said. I think right now, the market for left tackles is a shrinking market. So you might be able to get one of those couple guys for a deal that's pretty team friendly for the Browns. So I think they've put themselves in a good spot.
Well, and it's the summary of the 5 playing as one. And we haven't really been able to see that because they haven't been able to stay on the field the last few years. And I think they just decided we can't keep the band together and keep hoping on potential. And so, I feel they've addressed some big needs on the team. Now you're going to see Andrew Berry, what he does is backfill the roster. You'll see a lot of these 1 year, like today, the tight end. I picture that they send out 1 year offers to a lot of guys like that, and people that get no calls then say, I'll take it,
Sure.
That's just how I imagine it to be. And you're going to get guys on 1 year deals. They just say, this is what we're willing to give you. And maybe they send it to 2 or 3 and say, first one gets it, type thing. But they still have depth to fill. But I like that they jump quickly on Quincy Williams. Quincy Williams was brought up by Rutenberg in his opening press conference. I don't know if you heard that, but He talked about what the relationship he had with him. And that guy jumped on coming here. And he's, I really thought they should bring Bush back. He got paid, but I think they got a better deal with Quincy Williams. I mean, if he can go back to playing like he did under Rutenberg, those 4 years under him, he went over 100 tackles, and he was all pro. And I don't mean Pro Bowl. I mean all pro, one of the best 3 linebackers in the NFL in 23. So I'm not taking anything away from Devin Bush, but that's a playmaker, and if you can get him, there. So I think they at least broke even there if not the better. I think he's 1 year older than Bush. But now it's all attention on the offense besides some filling in some positions. I have him with 10 of the 11 starters on defense. I don't know if Diabate will be back. They didn't tender him, so he can sign as a free agent. Maybe they said, hey, we want you back. I don't go see what you can find. But they can find guys like that to fill in. So, yeah, it's all attack on the offense. It's a great start in the first 2 or 3 days. Like I said, I think they got 4 starters out of the 5 already addressed, and that depends. If you think Whippler's better at center and you can move one of the Jenkins, the one you got from the Packers, he had better grades at guard, maybe move him back to guard. And, just depending on what you have and who you think is best at that position.
Yeah, listen, it's like you said, it's a heck of a start. As we approach the back half of the show, I see our special guest is in the background. Again, want to give just a shout out, shameless plug real quick, 9:00, hour and a half from now. Make sure you're tuned in. We're going to talk more about the Browns. That'll be the back half of that show, but we're going to kick things off. We got Zach Meisel coming in from The Athletic to talk about the Guardians. We are 2 weeks away from the Guardian season starting out in Seattle. So we want to get you caught up on the Guardians. We'll talk about the Browns, the Cavs, and so much more. So Garage Beers happens at 9. Make sure your beers are getting cold. But we still got more Browns to talk about here. And we really only got through just a portion of the notes that I had written down. So I'm glad we're getting to our special guest with some fresh topics. And we're going to bring him in now from the Chronicle Telegram. He joined us, one of our first 5 or so guests we have ever had on this show. And he's joining us now in the off season. Let's bring him in right now. It's Scott Petrak. Scott, welcome back inside the Browns beat.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, first question. You played any golf yet?
I have not. Hit
What?
balls once, but that was it. I know. Working too
That's
hard.
because you got big responsibilities now over at the Chronicle.
Yeah. Plus, it's been raining. I look at my backyard, just swamp. The golf course can't be much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
And the
it's
ball
tough when
plugs a lot.
It's tough when those temperatures hit 70s and then the rain starts.
Right. But
Come
I did
on.
look out yesterday and think I should be playing golf.
That's fair. Instead, you were writing about the Cleveland Browns.
That's
and all the
exactly
moves
right.
that they were making. So, Scott, we've kind of thoroughly gone through, but I want to get your take on just a couple things we've talked about, just kind of real quick hitters to start, and then we're going to kind of move forward. But first thing we started with on the show, and maybe you can give us any insight that you have or your thoughts on the Joe Bitonio situation. They are going to void his contract. It's going to create a large cap hit, but still no word on what he plans to do. So what's your thought on the situation as it's unfolding with Bitonio?
Yeah, he's taken as much time as he needs to figure out if he's going to come back or not. I think the moves this week by the Browns are obviously preparing for life without Joe Bitonio, whether that's, as early as this season. And I think that's what they would expect, is that Joe Bitonio retires. They took that big cap hit. If they knew he was coming back, then they probably would have tried to work something out so they wouldn't have had to take that cap hit. They could have extended him and added years. Now, it doesn't mean he can't come back if he decides to, but all the moves this week lead you to connect some dots and think that, Joe Bitonio is probably going to retire.
Just real quick, from your understanding, Scott, if he decides to retire, there's probably a way that they will work that out to kind of extend out a year and build a dummy in, right? Or is that passed?
I think once it voided today, then it voided. And that was it. And they had to take the $23.5 million. That's my understanding.
That's the only thing that would weird me about this is if that is what happened and they took the hit instead of him saying weeks ago that he was just going to retire. But we'll see.
Well,
we'll find out.
Even if he would have retired, I think they would have had to take the hit. Like, the only way they could have done it is if he would have come back, then they could have extended it. But they couldn't have signed him to any kind of extension. Then he retires. So I don't think that was a factor in this at all.
Okay. And then Scott, just kind of give us a word. Your overall impression of the first couple days. Obviously, the legal tampering period, which is the most hilarious thing. But now, obviously, the first day of the new league year and the way Andrew Berry's approached it and the way the Browns have attacked it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear what the priority was, right? It was offensive line. which made all the sense. You didn't need to, study this team all that hard to figure out that's where the resources needed to go. Andrew Berry, like he's been in the past, is aggressive. He was aggressive with this offensive line. Starts with Titus Howard, goes to Zion Johnson, Elton Jenkins, bring back Tevin Jenkins. I think you could include Jack Stoll if you wanted. The blocking tight end is part of it. So that's where the resources needed to go. We can argue about talk about what they maybe also need to do. But I think, who knows how all these guys are going to play. I think they all have upside. They've all started a bunch of games, and I think that was the right approach for Andrew Berry to take, because I don't think you could count on multiple rookie starters coming in, and I certainly don't think you could count on multiple guys that were on your roster stepping into big-time starting roles. You mentioned Whippler or Zinter or Levinston, and maybe they wind up progressing and they earn starting jobs. But I would not have liked it if Andrew Berry counted on these guys from internal stepping up, because they just haven't shown enough or stayed healthy enough, even DeJuan Jones, to warrant you get handed a starting job.
Yeah, they've kind of done that before, especially at wide receiver. Just said, "Hey, Cedric, you're the starter." Didn't really have any competition. Sure, he had potential, but I think you're creating the competition. I'm kind of curious on what you think. You see a little bit that Rasheed Walker's out there. Do you complete the offensive line, if he becomes reasonable, or do you just wait for the draft and try to get the long-term guy, or do both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I certainly think his price would have to drop. I mean, you heard before free agency, it's going to be $20 million a year. That feels too high for him. I thought that was their Titus Howard move, right? Paying a guy $21 million at tackle. So it would have to drop. I would be fine, and I think the Browns would be fine waiting to the draft. I think there's plenty of guys that you can draft by number 39 even, and they could come in and start at left tackle for you. So, if you got a great bargain, then sure. But that doesn't feel to me like it's top of mind.
I did a thing on my opinion, the five priorities, and I had 5: depth on defense, getting Bush or replacement, and I had Quincy Williams as I think he's gonna be a good addition. But then I had interior. They really have kind of addressed that, but what they haven't, I thought they would tip their hand a little bit about quarterback. That was the third thing I had, because it just didn't seem like the year to get the quarterback. But I thought we would know a little bit about their thinking, seeing they were in discussions and, were outbid on Willis or whatever it is. I haven't heard anything about any of those things. And so to me, they haven't really tipped their hand. And there's not too many options left, right now. It looks like Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins both being penciled to the Vikings. And I don't think both can go to the Vikings. But if you have any inkling on they are still looking for something like that, or is it more, we're just going to stay with what we got, and see what happens?
Yeah, it's a great question, Freddie. I personally think you have to add somebody to this group. And that doesn't mean I don't think Shadur Sanders could be a good quarterback in this league. I've always said that before they drafted him. I just don't think he showed enough in those 7 starts to guarantee that he's going to be a success next year. So I think you have to add to that pile. Now, I would have gone after Malik Willis. I think he's legit. I don't think that money was too much for him. Now, it feels like he was going to Miami the whole time, and the Browns knew that, so they didn't really get heavily involved in those sweepstakes. I don't think Kyler Murray's the answer, and it looks like he's going to Minnesota. I don't think Kirk Cousins is. I didn't think Tua or Geno Smith was. I could certainly see them trying to trade or wait till he gets cut for Anthony Richardson, because then there's no expectation with him. Like if you sign Kyler Murray, or trade for Kyler Murray, sign Kyler Murray, or Tua, or certainly Malik Willis, that guy becomes your starter. There's too much money or too much history in the league. Richardson would just get added to this pile. And I feel like that's what the Browns are going to do and are trying to do, is they'd be okay with Or they'd be probably better than okay with Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel, but they need another guy. And whether that guy is a Richardson or you take him at 39 or in the third round in the draft, I just think that's the type of quarterback that will be added. Someone that competes and gets in, enters that open competition, but probably doesn't even have a leg up on Shedeur Sanders.
Fred, maybe Scott, Fred, maybe you guys can. I feel like I'm majorly in the minority on this opinion, but I find myself very opposite thinking of that, Scott, and I understand it. But for me, if you're not going to get one of the guys that you think you're going to hitch your wagon to, right? Malik Willis. If you're not going to say, all right, we're hitching our wagon to Malik Willis, and he's going to be our starter for the next several years because that's the contract we're giving him. If you're not going to bring in Kyler Murray, everybody likes to kind of bash on Kyler Murray, but he's put up some pretty awesome numbers in his career as a quarterback out there in Arizona. And I know why people don't like him, but if you're not going to hitch your wagon to a guy like that, then I'm not really sure what purpose just bringing in a guy does. And what I mean by that is my expectation of Shedeur Sanders is to become the franchise quarterback is about this percentage. It's about this. It's about 98% that I think it's probably not going to happen. But I do think he showed those little glimmers at times of going, well, maybe you get the right people to work with him. He showed a lot of the tools. Maybe you get the right coaching, you get him to buy in, and there's something there. What I don't know, here's what I can't kind of answer for you bring Kirk Cousins in. Right. Do I think we're going to win a bunch of games with Kirk Cousins next year? No. And do I think it tells us anything about the future then? No. I think it's just like, hey, maybe we win 6 games, and I don't know what that does for us. At least if you play Shedeur Sanders and he's bad, then you know it. Second year in a row, he has bad numbers. He's bad. And now going into next year, you have to find your quarterback answer. I don't know what the other thing serves, and maybe you could talk me off of that.
Well, no, I agree with you. That's why I feel like Malik Willis was different. I think he can be a franchise quarterback,
right?
But I would not do that with a Kirk Cousins. I don't think I would do it with a Mac Jones. And the upside for those type of guys is, let's say you think Shedeur's win 6 or 7 game guy. Maybe Mac Jones or Kirk Cousins can win 9. And if that's what you're chasing, then that's fine. And then you try to win as many games as possible in 2026. And I would never fault an organization for trying to do that. But I agree with you that the picture is bigger. It's a longer-term view. Obviously, we know they're going to have a really young roster. Barry said not until 2027 would they be hyper-aggressive in free agency. So you do have to look at it at 2026 and beyond. So that's why, unless you have a legit upgrade, like you said, I think you're fine running it back with Shedeur Sanders. I just think Anthony Richardson has, crazy upside because he's the 4th pick in the draft. If you draft Garrett Nussmeier, somebody in the building really likes him and maybe thinks he can be that guy, right? Like you're taking a low risk on a guy that you think has a bunch of upside. So I feel like that's different than a Cousins or a Mac Jones.
I kind of see with the Richardson deal, but here you've heard Monken and everybody praise Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. We really don't know where they stand, at least publicly. You were at Greenbrier with me for 2 summers. I've been on record and have said, if they stick with this open competition and you put Shedeur against Deshaun, I think Deshaun Watson is going to be the starting quarterback because he looked really good in the summer. He didn't play very well. And so that's, to me, if you're really just saying those things, I don't know how you get around that. And if you play Watson and you have burned Sanders, in my opinion, he's done. If he sits on the bench all year, then other than he just doesn't seem like a backup quarterback on a roster. He brings too much attention, but that's just my opinion.
No, I agree with that. I don't think Shedeur fits as a backup. I don't see. I agree with you, Freddie. If it were like a true open competition and the best quarterback won, then there's a good chance it's Deshaun Watson, right? He still throws it good, or what with the limited we saw at the end of the He still moves well, I'm sure, coming off the Achilles to whatever level. But I think it's a disservice to this team and Shedeur Sanders, but the team, if you go into the season thinking Deshaun Watson's going to be the starter. Because, number one, do we think he's going to make it through the season healthy when he hasn't played a full season since 2020? I think that's silly. So why commit to him as your guy? Now, if you want him as number 2 because you're paying him $46 million, I get that. And if Shedeur gets hurt or Shedeur struggles, or, if it happened to be Gabriel, but let's assume it's Shedeur, right? Then, sure, you can go to Deshaun Watson, and he's got a chance to win some games. But even if you went with Watson, like, what's the upside? He plays well, and then you got to decide what to do with him.
What are you going to do? Extend him?
No, there's no way you can extend him. He would have to win the Super Bowl, right? For you to go to the Super Bowl or whatever. For the Browns to think about extending him. So I think it'd be a disservice to start Deshaun Watson week 1 if Shedeur Sanders were healthy. And I would assume the Browns feel the same way, but you're right, Fred. They have not said that at all. And maybe that's just because you have to say that publicly and Deshaun Watson's on the roster.
I can't. The Deshaun Watson extension talk has me thinking we're going to be talking about his dead cap hit for another 10 years. And I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it anymore. Really quick, though, guys, because you've been in the room with Todd Monken. You've heard him talking. And Fred, you brought up something very interesting. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski approached last season with the quarterbacks and Flacco and Pickett and Sanders and Gabriel, and it was open competition, and they weren't going to name a starter until it was the season opener, basically. But Todd Monken has talked very differently about that, and he said by the time he gets to training camp, he wants to know who his starting quarterback is. And they're going to have a bit of time to work, but it very much sounds like Todd Monken's of the impression that you got to have that starter going into training camp, got to have that locked down and nailed, and then go from there. And I think that's just going to be a little bit of a different, kind of more comforting for Browns fans approach. There's no reason to see him stepping off of that no matter what they do, I don't think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I heard him say that at the Combine, and then I'm pretty sure he said on another interview, I don't know if it was Pro Football Talk, that the odds of knowing of having that number 1 guy decided by training camp is not great because he's just not going to have seen a lot of these quarterbacks. So I know that's what he wants. The reality might be different. Now, the reality might be they think it's Shedeur Sanders, and unless he shows them something that they don't want to see between April 7th and, the end of minicamp in June, it's going to be Sanders. Like, I could certainly see that path. But if you're talking on the field, you just don't see these guys enough. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. I completely understand why Monken and fans would want that decision made because it doesn't do a whole lot of good, like we've seen how many times, to extend that competition. And going back to what we just talked about, I don't think you need to. So, yeah, let's hope they have a quarterback leaving minicamp in June.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, you have a 4-man competition and you trade 2 of them before 4 games are out of the way. And the guys you got that didn't get any work were the guys you were left with for the rest of the season. Made no sense. So, that's it. They haven't really tipped their hand, and I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they're going to in the draft, but moving forward, you raise a valid point. A guy like Richardson, maybe under the radar, wouldn't be anointed the starter if you brought him in, but maybe he would be better than what you have. So I just find it fascinating because you make open competition. Deshaun looks good in practice when he's not getting hit, and it's been different in the game. And then if he did play and he had a good year, he's not coming back here. He's not going to say, well, man, you guys stood with me for 5 years and $230 million. I'm going where I can get the most money, Right. It's just the way it
creates so many problems, which, we've covered this team a long time. You longer than me, Freddie, nothing would stun me, right? I just don't think it makes any sense to even leave that door open if you can avoid it. Plus, there is something in Shedeur Sanders. Like, there is potential there.
Yes.
So why not see more of it? And you should have, and again, it's only his second year, but if he played all 17 games, or even the majority, you would think you have a better idea if he can be top 15 guy in the league, right? Do you need to go spend a draft pick in 2027? It just makes, unless you're going to have a significant upgrade. And if you wanted to sell me on that before the offseason, you could have, right? Because I don't think anybody on this roster has guaranteed themselves a chance to be the week 1 starter, right? Shedeur didn't in 7 games. Watson certainly hasn't. Gabriel certainly hasn't. But I don't see that path now. So if there's no path there, is Ty Simpson the answer 24? Like then you start talking about those kinds of scenarios. And it certainly feels like, because we've made it through whatever the early stage of free agency, that if they're going to add, it's going to be somebody lower tier or in the draft.
Yeah. Guys, I can't believe it took us till the last 9 minutes of this show to get to this, but we've talked the way they've really attacked and gone after the offensive line has been spectacular. But now it's really starting to shift the conversation to the other area of the offense that is just in desperation, desperate need of upgrading. And that is the wide receiver position. They have not touched that yet, which, to be honest with you guys, something I'm grateful for. Fred, you and I talked about it before. They are not acting desperate. They're not out there signing a guy like Alec Pierce to a $29 million a year contract, which is nuts. We've seen some guys go off: Wardale Robinson, Romeo Dubs, Rashid Shaheed, all over $17 million a year. These guys at wide receiver are getting big time contracts this offseason because, frankly, the wide receiver pool isn't great in this free agency. So, Scott, Fred, when you look at what they've done and you look forward, it's hard for me to believe that Andrew Berry's just going to leave the wide receiver position alone, especially after we saw such a step back from Jerry Jeudy last year. Hopefully he can come back better this year, but you know what they've got in the draft. Again, 3 picks in the top 40. There's some really good wide receivers sitting there at the top that they should have access to. And there's some really good second-tier wide receivers in the draft. And then when you look at free agency and the players that are still available, let's throw Tyreek Hill off the conversation. But guys like Deebo Samuel, Christian Kirk, Darnell Mooney, I don't know if these guys are floating anybody's boat. Marquise Brown. Just tell me what you guys think the approach now becomes at the wide receiver position.
I think there's a chance that he makes a trade, right? Which is always really difficult to predict. You would think it might have happened by now, but there's still candidates out there. So I would keep an eye open for that. Like you said, they didn't, and I agree that they shouldn't have signed Alec Pierce. It made a big splash. Those second-tier guys, whatever, they don't change the room. So it becomes a possible trade or the draft. And I think Barry recognizes that he needs to add to that position, although I've thought that before and he hasn't, right? Last offseason, felt like he needed to, and Isaiah Bond was the only real addition. They brought in Malachi Corley, but they didn't draft anybody high. They didn't sign anybody big in free agency. I think he realizes that he needs to, and I think the offensive line moves allow him the flexibility in the draft that if he wants to take a receiver at 6, he can, and he can wait to take a lineman. Or if he trades down, then it opens up either position for wherever the trade down to is. I would think one of their first 2 picks is a receiver, or they still leave the door open for a trade.
Yeah, we all seen his best work has been in trades. Now the key is there anybody like Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy out there? A lot of us thought Brian Thomas from Jacksonville, but recently it sounded like they're kind of pulling back from that down there. I don't know. You look at the guys, I think Ayuk got released today. Are those guys fits? I feel personally Jeudy is more of a number 2 than a number 1. And if you feel Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson are a blue chip, top of the line, you can't live without, you take them. If you don't think that's the case and they're all about the same, well, then maybe you trade down and take whoever's available. But I do think you have to add at least 1, if not 2, to that room because you were there, Scott. Schweitzer, I don't think he misspoke when I asked him about the wide receiver room and he mentioned Jeudy, and then he threw in Bond just on the way out and went right to Fannin. He only mentioned 2 wide receivers on the roster. And that's not a great endorsement of one of the starters, Cedric Tillman. So I have to think but yeah, last year I had that as like their third biggest need, and they didn't even add anybody until Bond was available after all his legal problems. So I still think it is, and all the moves with the line, but I just don't know, who's available in a trade, because he's good at evaluating a guy that's already been good somewhere and the team just doesn't want to pay him. He can evaluate that pretty good and figure out the money like he did with Judy and Cooper. So is that guy out there? I don't know. But
and that
if they
trade
can't,
doesn't have to happen. That trade doesn't have to happen until the draft, right? I mean, it could even come. Let's just throw the Jaguars out there. Let's say the Jaguars think they're going to draft someone and pick whatever. So they go ahead and they're open to trading Thomas. So or pick any other team. Like once you get past the early stages for agency, there's a lot of time for those kind of deals to be worked out.
I think they just have a unique opportunity. Everybody talks about draft strategy, but the reality is, I think the conversation around trading for need versus best player available is kind of a dumb conversation because every team does. You try to do both. You're trying to knock both of those things off, and I think they have an opportunity. The way they built this offensive line, you've got an opportunity to go out there and get two of the best wide receivers in the top 40 picks of the draft and still walk away with one of the better offensive linemen in the top 40 picks of the draft. The Cleveland Browns offense, I think Andrew Berry is dangerously close. Well, quarterback close. He is a quarterback away from making this a really good-looking Cleveland Browns offense. I think it's right there in front of him.
Yeah, but you have to get the picks right?
That's right. That's
and
fair.
The signings have to be the right signings. I'm with you. I don't know if any of the receivers is worthy of 6. I'm sure Cardinal Tate fans believe he is. I don't know about that. But even if they trade back, you can get guy there. You can get a guy at 39. I think that is the recipe. And the other part of that is you talk about the line, and then let's assume they do these moves at receiver. That's the kind of supporting cast you would want to evaluate Shadur Sanders, right? You have to give him pieces that he didn't have last year.
Yes.
And that's the only way you get a true evaluation.
And you've given him that already. You've given him that already with an offensive line that should be at least healthier than what it was last year. That was a big theme to the moves they've made on the offensive line. These guys that they've brought in are durable football players. They don't miss a lot of time. I think that might have been really important for them after what they've been through the last several years. Scott, Fred, as we get ready to wrap up the show here tonight, I'll just kind of throw a softball question out to you guys. I do have one thing. Hold on. Let me get to this first, Scott, because I don't want to forget this. We're going to come back to one more Browns question, but we got a really cool story. And I don't know if you'll recognize any of this or not, but our buddy Chef Brian K that's here every week with us. When we said we were bringing you on from the Chronicle, near and dear to my heart with all the stuff I've done with WEOL out there. But he gave us a story. He said, "Hello, Scott. I used to deliver the Chronicle growing up. Down on Washington Avenue was my route. Yeah. The ironic part is that the Hudnuts, the owners of the Chronicle, were one of his customers, which is hilarious. So he left Elyria in 79, and his father was Bill Kennedy, moved them all out to Phoenix. And he said, you might know that he owned the train station right down the street from the Chronicle, where he had his cosmetology school. He just wanted to throw this out there, Scott. When his dad passed away in 2008, the Chronicle put his picture and obituary on the front page. And here we are almost 20 years later, and you can tell that's something still very near and dear to Chef Brian K here. So shout out to your employer and to you guys there at the Chronicle for doing something really cool for this Kennedy family here.
Well, I'm glad.
There it is. All right, softball question for both of you. As you look forward, what have we not talked about enough here on this show? We've talked a lot about offensive line, a lot about wide receivers. We talked about how they added a linebacker. But what's another move you could see the Browns making that you think maybe enough people aren't talking about?
That's a good question. I mean, they got the number 2 tight end that I figured they would get. Man, you know what? Maybe another linebacker. Diabate, Fred mentioned earlier, is they didn't tender him. That doesn't mean he can't come back, but he's got the opportunity to leave. And Jerome Baker's a free agent. So after Schlesinger and Williams, a lot of question marks, right? Buki Watson's coming back from injury. Winston Reed's coming back from injury. While I'm on that topic, third safety. Rayshawn Jenkins is a free agent. we know what Jim Schwartz liked to do with three safeties. I would assume Rutenberg is going to want to do something similar, and they might need to go get somebody like that.
Yeah, I was going to say cornerback. I had in depth. I mentioned, a guy, and one of them was Quincy Williams replacing Bush if they couldn't, re-sign Bush. But second was Martin Emerson or his replacement. He was an up-and-comer, but when they traded for Tyson Campbell, it changed the dynamic. And I don't know how he is coming off the Achilles for a corner, but he might not want to come back, probably not the starter when he was the starter with Newsome moving inside. So they need a slot cornerback. I don't think Miles Harden's the answer. I mean, maybe he had a couple, but I know Cameron Mitchell's your guy from Northwestern, but when they put him in, when one of those guys last year went down, man, they were picking on him left and right, whether it was Harden or Mitchell. I think you always need more corners, and I think you especially need a slot corner.
Yeah, that's a good point, Freddie. I mean, I thought Harden played okay. I thought he played pretty well when he was in the slot. When they asked him to play outside against, I think it was the Bears when Denzel was hurt.
Yes.
They went after him. So I think in the slot he's okay, but you're right. They need corners. I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about Emerson just because he's not healthy. But I think if they could get him back on a one-year deal and you have those three guys on the outside and then figure out, can Denzel – I don't know, do you want Denzel playing inside? They might still have to add a slot corner regardless.
I'm going to throw one last one at you because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I'm not going to be surprised if with one of their first 4 or 5 picks in the draft, you don't see an edge rusher come off the board. They're a little thinner up front than we are used to talking about, are the Cleveland Browns. So I think you could see another presence up there getting after the quarterback. Maybe look at the kid out of Penn State towards the middle rounds. Or I know they just got reported they're bringing in the kid from Oklahoma for a top 30 visit, the edge rusher. So I think the Browns, it may even surprise people. Again, we're going to sit here and talk going into the draft about wide receivers and offensive linemen, but it's also not going to surprise me in the slightest if the 24th pick in the draft is an edge rusher or
Go
a
get Max Crosby.
What just forget it. We just got first-round picks back. I want first-round picks. All right, Scott, it has been a blast having you back on. We appreciate your insight, your takes on the Browns, everything that you brought to the table, and we sincerely hope you manage to find your way out to the golf course sometime soon. But Scott Petrak from the Chronicle Telegram, we appreciate your time, and we look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Scott.
Big shout out once again to Scott Petrak. Awesome of him to join. Brought some good stuff there, Fred. And again, we still didn't get through kind of all the notes that I had, but long off season, plenty of stuff left to talk about. Fred, any last words before we get out of here?
No, just the thing that I was going to we would have had more time with Scott was, I just think, if they were to sign Rasheed Walker, just say that, and they feel like the line's addressed, you really could come into the best player available in the draft. I still think it is, but we're talking about Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, these type guys. I really think ultimately they'll trade down if they can a couple spots. And if they can get a extra, pick like they did last year, I don't know at 6 if you can get as much as you got last year at 2, but I can see them doing that because of the success they had and add another tackle or another wide receiver or something like that. But it's an interesting thing because I still haven't went off that. If a guy like Caleb Downs is there, I don't know if I could pass him.
Well, I think we'll see. I think if they do, I love that point. I think if they go out and get whoever they might bring in at left tackle, and then you're talking about you've got a little depth now too, because DeJuan Jones is still on the team. Luke Whippler's still on the team. Zach Sinter. These aren't guys that you're going to really rely on. But if DeJuan Jones is my backup tackle on either the left or right side, I feel pretty good about that. I feel all right about that.
Yep.
And then you can just go attack. Somebody brought it up in the comments earlier, and I wish I could go back and find it. But then you start looking. Jeremiah Love just feels like he's going to be such a piece to what the Browns do because I know Washington is enamored with him as a running back, and Washington's the pick right behind the Browns. So if you want Jeremiah Love, you probably feel like you got to get up over Washington. That might put the Browns in such a good position to trade back. I would have thought maybe Kansas City, but then they made the move for Kenneth Walker. But if somebody wants to come up and get that running back and they want him that early, the Browns could be in prime position to trade back, get more assets, and then you're not going to get as much as you did last year for the second pick, but that's okay. And then, man, you can really just start attacking the best players out there. And if they're able to do that, regardless of the hits and misses in the draft, if they're able to do that, Fred, then I think you've got to give Andrew Berry credit for getting the team to the point where it gets to just be able to attack the draft that way, because that's how you want to attack it anyway. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Again, the league new year just started today, so there's going to be plenty of stuff left to go with news. But, we're going to have it all for you here on the OBR, which, by the way, speaking of the OBR, if you're not a subscriber, hit that QR code with your phone, get to the subscription page, and make sure you are subscribed. The OBR right now got stuff coming at you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night here on the streaming network. Plus, remember, when we get to the end of April and it's draft season, we got the OBR Draft Cave. It's one of the best spots to watch the draft. I'll be busy that whole weekend here talking about the draft, and I know most of us with the OBR will be as well. So we've got it all coming to you. And then again, over on the website, whether it's the articles, the forums, whatever, the OBR, the place to be for Browns coverage. Make sure you go get subscribed over there. And then again, one more shameless plug. Just be ready in about 53 minutes, less than that. Come back for Garage Beers. Bring your beers with you. We're talking Guardians baseball with Zach Meisel from The Athletic, as we are 2 weeks away from opening day out in Seattle. Plus, we're going to talk more about the Browns. We'll talk about the Cavs and the Blue Jackets and all that and more over some cold beer. So grab a beer. Come join us for Garage Beers at 9 o'clock. That's going to do it for us here on Inside the Browns Beat. For Fred Greetham, I am Michael Keefe. We'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Browns.